Symmetry is a wonderful thing. Today let's go back to the Romantic era and talk about diminished seventh chords. Now, the reason we haven't talked about it up to this point is because we really don't use diminished seventh chords in worship music. I mean, when's the last time you saw one in a contemporary chorus?
Almost never.
Almost never. But in the hymnal, there are a good number of them. By a good number, I mean a bad number, because they're kind of confusing.
Yeah. But, I mean, you might find one every 2 hymns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's a lot. There are a lot of diminished seventh chords. And so therefore, in music theory for worship, we really need to talk about the diminished seventh chord, so at least you can understand that. Now, in order to grasp the diminished seventh chord, we really have to put our minds back into the Romantic era of the 1800s.
Back where Beethoven was expressing himself through chords that could not be described as merely major or minor. No, he needed the angst represented in something diminished.
Something so dissonant that there could be nothing more dissonant. Any combination of 4 notes, the most dissonant thing in the world is a diminished seventh chord.
And yet it's also the most symmetrical.
Yes. So it became this magical chord that he used quite a bit to go from one key to another, to create a lot of dissonance and angst, and we use it a fairly good amount in schmaltzy gospel songs and black gospel turnarounds. That's when we use it the most. Let's talk about 5 ways to build a diminished seventh chord.
Using tools you can find in your own backyard. First, take your common houseplant and perhaps a backhoe.
No, not. We're going to come inside now. We just found the tools outside, and now we are going to use them inside. All right, start with major scale. All right, start with a 7 chord in the key of C.
You already have a half diminished 7 right there.
It's a half diminished 7th. Lower the 7th. It's fully diminished 7th.
Diminished 7.
On its way back to 1.
Once resolved to 1.
Took 1 lowered accidental in order to create it. That was pretty easy.
Another way is to go out into your backyard and grab 3 pine cones. These pine cones...
No, wait. We need to come inside.
Oh, right.
Okay. If we're in a minor key, the 7th scale degree is a flatted 7th and creates this dominant 7th.
If you raise that root up a half step, diminished 7.
And that happens anyway in harmonic minor. So you might say a diminished 7th chord naturally occurs in harmonic minor mode. That's where most of Bach's use comes. Okay.
Now, our third way will be quite common to you Indianers, because you'll need 3 ears of corn. Now,
no. Let's come inside. We're coming inside. We're talking about diminished 7th chords. Okay, diminished 7th chords. I'm sorry. Bear with us here.
Start with a naturally occurring dominant 7 chord.
Okay.
So you have, if you're in the key of C, that's a G7.
That could be your 5/7 chord. Mm-hmm.
Your 5/7. Now, merely raise up that root. Pull up the roots, and there you see.
Raise the root, and you have a 7 of 6.
There you go.
Now that more often actually occurs with scale degree 1 or 4, in which case I also have to lower the 7th and raise the root with both a 1 and a 4, because they are normally in major 7 chord. You first have to make it a dominant 7th chord. So that then requires 2 accidentals, 1 lowered and 1 raised.
Now, way number 4, we just need you to go out to your fence. Perhaps you have a chain link fence, or perhaps a wooden fence. Grab 3 links.
No. We're still inside building diminished 7th chords. I'm sorry. Take any major chord. Lower the 3rd. And the 5th. And add a 6th on top.
6th on top? I thought you said this was a diminished 7th.
It works, though. We'll talk about it in a little bit. But anyway, that's a way to do it. We just lower the 3rd and the 5th. Add a 6th on top. Does it sound like Beneath the Cross of Jesus? Okay, so that's a fourth way.
And by lowering the third and fifth, you will find that that is much like our fifth way of doing it, in which you need to go outside, grab a shovel, and just start digging. And when you...
No, there's something very basic you're not understanding. We're indoors here. We just use this metaphor to say tools that you have in your own backyard. It wasn't outside work. It was inside work, building diminished seventh chords. So here's the last way that we can. It really is. I'm so sorry. We start with any pitch, and just start building minor thirds above it. Another minor third, stack another one, stack another one. What's cool about that is when you get to the last one, it's a minor third away from the first note that you had. That is a part of the magical quality of diminished seventh chords and why they're so very nifty.
Is this practical in worship today? Well, becoming less and less practical as we have more of a chordal harmony. But let's check out some hymnals. Let's explore the practical use of a diminished seventh chord in a contemporary setting.
For example, the song Great Is Thy Faithfulness. All I have need, thy hand hath provided. Here's a 4 chord. I raise the root of my 4 chord. It's a 7 of 5, which goes to a 1-6-4, which goes to a 5, to a 1. You see that a lot. That chord shows up a lot. Here's a part of the magical quality of these diminished seventh chords. I said they were magical because they are invertible. Invertible.
Do tell.
If I stacked minor thirds, it just goes on forever.
In a repetitious fashion.
So that this chord sounds like this one.
Obviously the voicing is different as the root note is just going up a third, but it's all the same notes. In that case, a C, E flat, G flat, and A. B double flat.
B double flat. But B double flat sounds just like an A. So now if I go up a half step, I create another diminished seventh chord. That goes forever. If I go up another half step, I've got another one that keeps going in thirds.
But what if you go up another one?
One more. Wait a minute, that's the same.
As the first, which means there are only 3, count them, 3 pine cones in your backyard.
3 diminished seventh chords. There are only 3 of them.
3 diminished seventh chords.
And you say to yourself, oh, all those complex ways of talking about things, I don't think they can be played on guitar. That's really complex. Just hold on a minute. What if we started with a G7? The bottom 4 strings. And I raised my G by half a step, remember? That's a fully diminished seventh chord. And all I did was push down 2 frets right there. And now, if I put a little bar here, and then push down 2 frets, and do it again, that's all the diminished seventh chords there are.
Because there are only 3, count them, 3 pine cones in your backyard.
Only 3 diminished seventh chords. So you could use those anywhere. Now here's what's so cool about that then. So if I have a C diminished seventh chord, C, E flat, G flat, B double flat, and I respell that, C, D sharp, F sharp, A. Well, that's on its way. It's a 7th chord of D flat. The C diminished chord is 7 of D flat. Or that D sharp diminished 7th chord is a 7 of E.
Since D sharp is a leading tone to E.
Or it's an F sharp diminished 7th chord, which is a 7 of G.
Now realize, playing all these back to back, it sounds a little strange, but in a given context of a key, you really feel like it has that tension and resolution.
Because it's the most dissonant chord, therefore. So I could go from this C diminished chord, I could resolve it to a D flat, or I could suddenly move to E which is a very distantly related key. Or I could suddenly go to the key of G, D flat, or G, or B flat. Yes, I could resolve to any of those.
In fact, going back to our last lesson on Hansen chemical analysis, if you add up all the qualities of a diminished 7, fully diminished 7 chord, you'll find, using only 4 notes, it is the largest chemical analysis you can come up with.
If we take the 1 chord, raise the root, make it a 7th, it's on its way to 2, to 5. That's very common in black gospel music to get us wound up for a 2-5-1. The most common thing in the hymnal is the common tone diminished 7th chord. We talked about the sharp 4 on its way to 5. It's also just the 1 chord where we take and we lower the 3rd and the 5th and we add a 6th. I said, beneath the cross of Jesus. Here's another really famous one. Wonderful grace of Jesus. There it is. Now when you spell it out in thirds, what we usually do is we take instead of spelling it as C, E, G, and then we make it an E flat and a G flat, we usually spell it as a D sharp and an F sharp because they're on their way back to E and G. And so when you read it in the hymnal and you do all the math and you try to figure it out, you say, well, that's a 7 of 3. I'll tell you this. If you see 7 of 3 in the hymnal, it's not a 7 of 3. 7 of 3 in the hymnal virtually never goes to 3.
It almost always goes back to 1.
Yeah.
Therefore, we just call it a common tone diminished chord of a 1.
As a matter of fact, it's usually when you do the 4-7 chord that we talked about on its way, if it goes to a 1-6-4, it's spelled exactly the same way. You see 7 of 3. So it's on its way to 1-6-4 and then to 5-1. Right about now, you're saying you don't care. Well, you know, we care that you don't care, but we don't care enough to not keep talking about it. So get over it and start to care, because there will come a day when you need to use a diminished 7th chord.
And you'll thank us.
You'll thank us because you have the tools.
And just remember, when you're finished with these diminished 7 chords, be sure to water thoroughly for 3 days and try to get as much good sunlight as you can.
Daniel, I think it's time for you to stop talking.